All right, let's talk about how to solve this problem. So, for starters, you need to draw a diagram. The diagram itself makes up part of the 3 points that A is worth. So the first thing you need to do on the diagram is draw the object with the motion. That means drawing the curved path it's traveling. Take off 1/2 point if you didn't draw the object's motion or draw the situation. The second thing you need to do is label your numbers given in the problem. So 17 meters for the height, 35 meters per second for the velocity. So 35 meters per second forward, 17 meters down. Take off another 1/2 point if you're missing that part. And then lastly, the positive and negative directions. It does not matter whether you picked up or down to be positive. It just matters that you have it. That's also a 1/2 point. So the picture itself is worth 1.5 points. Basically 1/2 off for each part you're missing. Okay, the next thing you need to do is your t-chart. So you should have x in one column and y in the other. And here's the numbers you should have in. You should have the velocity of 30 meters per second. It is going forward, not up, not down. So that means this is Vx. So that's the first thing you have. Okay, 17 is down, so that's the y displacement. And because I called down positive, I would make this positive 17. If you called down negative, you make it negative 17. All right, after that, there's not a lot of other stuff that we don't have to assume. So we're going to have to assume some stuff. First of all, A is always 9.8. Mine's positive only because down is positive for me. And because it's going forward only and not up and down for starters, VI is 0 for the y direction. So the knowns and unknowns are also worth 1.5 points total. So for this one, if you're missing anything, take off a 1/2 point. Don't take off a 1/2 point per thing missing. Just if you're missing something, it's a 1/2 point off. If you're missing more than one something's, still just a 1/2 point off. Second thing would be if you have anything in the wrong column, take a 1/2 point off. So if you have 17 in the x or 35 in the y or something like that, take off a 1/2 point for that. And lastly, take off a 1/2 point if you have something like labeled wrong. So you didn't write 35 for Vx, you wrote 35 for Dx. Or you wrote, this would be V final or something like that. Or you made V final 0 or something along those lines. So 1/2 point is, do you have all the correct things, these 4 for starters. The second 1/2 point is for making sure that they're in the right columns. And the third thing is making sure that they're the right thing. So 1.5, 1.5, total of 3 points for part A. All right, part B. How long would it take the driver to reach the water? So how long is time? So when we're trying to solve for time, our equation sheet tells us that time goes in both columns. And we figure out what column to use based off of what we have more information in. Well, we only have enough information in the y, so I'm going to use a y equation. So Old Faithful Big Chalupa ain't got no time. I'm going to pick the y equation that has these things in it, D, A, V, I, T. And the only one that has all those things in it is Big Chalupa. Okay, so D, and again, I'm falling, but I made down positive. So D equals VI T plus 1/2 A T squared. 0 times anything is 0, so you can get rid of that. So this gives me 17 equals 4.9 T squared. I need to get T by itself, so that means dividing the 4.9 over first. It's divided because it was being multiplied, so do the opposite. That gives me 3.47 equals T squared. I don't want T squared, I want just T. Square root both sides. T equals 1.86 seconds. Okay, this part of the problem is worth 3 points. You get 1 point for getting the correct equation, just like having the correct equation, so you know which one to use. Okay, and then you get another point for setting up the equation correctly, and another point for getting the correct answer. So if you got the wrong answer, it's a half point off for a small minor math error. It's 1 point off for a big math error. So a big math error would be just you just completely butcher the problem. You make lots of mistakes. You subtract. You do several things incorrectly. You forget the square root. You subtract instead of dividing. Whatever the case may be. You take a half point off if it's a minor mistake. You forget to square root the number at the end. You square root earlier on, and you forget to square root 4.9 and 17. You subtract instead of divide, but that's the only mistake you make. Those kind of things. Okay. Likewise, if you don't have the equation set up, or you don't have to write out Big Chalupa. You can just set it up like this, but you need to have the equation somewhere in there. All right. C, how far from the base of the cliff would the driver land? So how far from the base tells me it's how far D, but it's in the x direction. It's how far forward I went. And the only equation that works for that is V equals D over T. Now I'm going to go back up here, and I'm going to put in my values for T. The value I had for T was 1.86 seconds. So I'm going to use that number down here. So the V I'm going to use is the x velocity, which is 35, not 0. So 35 equals dx. Notice I'm not using 17. I'm using x numbers, not y numbers, over t. And the t is the 1.86 I just got. .2 meters. Okay. Same thing. Make sure you have the correct equation set up. Make sure you got things plugged in the right spot, and make sure that you have an answer. If your answer is incorrect, it's 1 point off. It's a major math thing. It's a half point off. It's a minor math thing. It's 0 points off if the only thing you did wrong was get the wrong answer for B. So if this answer would have been correct, other than the fact that this number is wrong, do not take off any points. Otherwise, half point off for a minor math thing, 1 point off for a major math thing. And then another point off if you don't have the equation set up, another point off if you just don't have anything done, if you just are lost on that part. Okay, D. How fast is the car going right before hitting the water? Remember, I need a resultant velocity and a vector. So the first thing to do is to keep in mind where it is we're solving. We're solving here at the end, and we're solving for this velocity here. And that velocity is made up of a forward velocity and a downward velocity. So I'm going to draw that out here just to help me. So we're solving for C, the resultant vector, and we're going to need to know the angle as well. What I'm given is A, or the x velocity, and B, the y velocity, at the end, right? Because this is at the end of the motion. So let's go ahead and plug in the numbers that we know. We know what Vx is, okay? Vx is 35, and it never changes, so I'm going to leave that as 35. We don't know what Vf is, so the first thing we need to do is solve for Vf. Since that's the only thing we don't know, we can solve for it using any y equation. So I'm going to use Old Faithful because it's the easiest. V final equals V initial plus A t, and t is 1.86. Gives me a final velocity of 18.2 meters per second. And again, because I called down positive, I'm getting a positive answer for downward motion, which is what I should get. So that's what V final is, 18.2. This is worth 1 point, this part right here. So if you have a math error, if it's a minor one, half point off. If you kind of butcher that part of the problem, then it's 1 off. So now I've got 2 of the 3 sides. I can use that to find the third. I'm going to use Pythagorean Theorem, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. So the a squared is 35 plus the b squared, which is the 18.2. Equals c squared. So 35 squared here. Apologies. Oh, geez. Anyway, I'll figure it out. 35 squared. 1,225 plus 18.2 squared. 331.24 equals c squared. 1556.24 equals c squared. Square root both sides to get c by itself. C equals 39.4 meters per second. This part is also worth 1 point, and the scale for grading is the exact same. You take off points if you're made a math error or if you're missing stuff. So 1 point off if you're missing a lot of stuff, half point off if you just made a little math error. And the last thing we need to do, we found the resultant velocity. Now we need to find the angle. The equation we use for theta, if you look on your equation sheet, for theta we're using tangent. So tangent theta equals b over a. So tangent of the angle equals b, which is 18.2, over a, which is 35. Equals 51.5. Now I need to do the opposite of tangent, and the opposite of tangent is tan negative 1. And when I do that, I get I make a mistake is what I do. 18.2 divided by 35. There we go. Second tangent of that. 27.5 for the angle. Again, same grading scale on that one. It's worth a total of 1. Any mistakes you make. So the total is out of 12. So what I want you to do is go through and tell me how many did you get right out of 12. Again, you just needed to try, so don't worry about getting it correct. I just want to know what this score is. So be honest with yourself. It is only going to help you for me to know if you're doing poorly. If you get a 2 out of 12, don't lie about it. Don't fake it. Just tell me what it is, because I want to make sure I can help you if you need it. All right, go ahead and get working on the practice and fix and do the online survey as well. Okay, have a blessed day.